Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us from different parts of the world. My name is Yolande Andrews. I am the Key Populations and Human Rights Program Manager for NACOSA, and I'm very happy to welcome you to NACOSA's series of webinars hosted under the banner of Amaqhawekazi Harm Reduction Project. NACOSA is a national networking organization working to build stronger, more equal, healthy, and safe communities, free from HIV/AIDS, TB, and gender-based violence. We do this by strengthening community systems, mobilizing and managing resources, facilitating networking and collaborations, providing and enabling access to services, advocating, and learning and sharing collectively. It is really a critical time that we continue to raise awareness on how violations experienced by people with disabilities remain hidden, including denial of education, inaccessible healthcare, workplace discrimination, and abuse in institutions. The speakers at this webinar will highlight these challenges to create visibility and push society to confront uncomfortable truths. Even though South Africa has really strong laws, such as the Constitution, the Promotion of Equality, and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, we still find implementation gaps. This webinar is not just about talking. It's about building visibility, accountability, and commitment to action for a more inclusive society for people with disabilities. We have several speakers from the South African Human Rights Commission, the Department of Social Development, as well as from the SANAC Civil Society Forum. But what we first wanted to do is to raise awareness around the different types of disabilities. Too often we talk about visible disabilities and we talk about programming for this, but we do not necessarily acknowledge that there are hidden disabilities. We have a video that has been produced for NACOSA under the corporate social investment of New Productions, which is a subsidiary of the Avenue House Pty Limited. They have given up their resources and time to raise awareness around disabilities and the different types of disabilities. And we have first-hand experiences from two NACOSA staff members as shown in this video.
I'm doing this today to create awareness for those with hidden disabilities, specifically those with ASD, also known as autism spectrum disorder, and advocate for those who don't have a voice.
Hi, my name is Inati. I'm 25 years old. I'm currently working at NACOSA as an intern, and I'm doing this to raise awareness for people with cerebral palsy because I feel like we need to be known.
A lot of the time when I disclose that I'm autistic, it's very much what, like they get taken aback because they have this idea about like or this visual of what autism looks like. I think going back to years ago, there was a certain look that those on the spectrum would have, but now that so much research has been done and people are diagnosed now, and the spectrum is so broad, people portray it differently, and I think a lot of people don't know that. So there's no look that we have. I mean, you could walk by so many people on the street and not know that they have ASD and so on.
The misconception people have about me is that because I'm in a wheelchair, like I can't function or I can't do things myself. But little did people know I can, actually. I can even walk around without my wheelchair. I just really wish people could stop saying like things like, oh, shame, or like, oh my gosh, like tiptoeing around disability. It's okay. We're good. I'm good about my disability. So people shouldn't be afraid. And people shouldn't be afraid to even use the word disability because
Like it's a bad word, right?
It's something that's there, and it it's something that will forever be there. So yeah.
It's so much, and
I could imagine.
and I think people don't understand that being a parent is already tough, and having to manage with all these other challenges, people not understanding when she has a meltdown, even when friends come over. Oh, why do we have our house set up like this? Why is this here? Why is that there? It's because our house is set up in a way that is manageable and good for us as a family, a way that's regulating to us.
To me, exclusion looks like, when I go out, I get there, there's stairs, and then now people have to be like, what must we do? Like, oh, sorry, we can't accommodate you, and then they move on with their lives, and they don't even make space to okay, let's try to accommodate her. That to me is blatantly exclusion to me. I'm sorry, please. And inclusions is where I go to places and then they they're like, okay, we're gonna move such furniture, we're gonna do this, we're gonna help you, how can we help you, kind of thing. So to me that is inclusion.
I actually had a braais with some friends where they make sure that the setting is done in such a way where I can take mini breaks. So if the music's playing, for example, and I can't do or handle it anymore because it's talking and it's music and it's general noises, it's too much. So then I can take little sensory breaks and just pull myself together again and carry on. So that's really helpful.
When I was in matric, we had consumer classes, right? So there was this girl who was just a mean girl. I won't mention her name, shame. So we were getting chosen for partner, to be partners, and then me and her were left. So they were like, no, we're gonna be partners together. And then she was like, no, I don't want to work with her because she doesn't do much. She just sits there, and I now need to put in the work where she just sits there. Duh, because it's cooking and I can't carry things from point A to point B. So I felt I just lost it. I lost it there. I had a meltdown at school and it was just crazy.
Did the teachers do anything about it?
I mean, no, but my friends were like, okay, I'll be your partner. And she swapped her partner with the girl. So yeah, that was sorted. But it still triggers me up till this day. I mean, that was 5 years ago, but yeah, it still does kind of trigger me.
It's traumatic,
because how do you say that to someone? How was I supposed to feel? But yeah,
I've had so many small instances, but I'll mention one that's affected me the most, I would say in the last few years. So I was obviously employed, and I eventually disclosed that I was autistic because I realized I needed certain accommodations to actually function in the workplace and do my job better. And these accommodations are nothing that affects anybody else. It's not, taking less hours or, asking for anything that costs money or anything like that. It's literally just things that allow me to process and do my job. And then it was fine. Everything was okay. The accommodations were questioned because they weren't understood. And then eventually I applied for a different position at the same company, and my abilities were questioned.
Ugh. Oh gosh.
So there was a back and forth for maybe 2 weeks. Like, can I actually handle the job? I wouldn't have applied if I didn't think I could handle it.
Yeah, I mean, people really think we're stupid, but okay.
So I did get the position, but when I was discussing my accommodations again, it was like not understood. And, you know, every conversation I had just seemed rushed. And like, I really wanted to explain why I needed those accommodations and what it's for, what it means. And it was just like almost pushed aside, and it caused me unnecessary stress and anxiety for nothing.
I can imagine. Disability is only one part of you. It does not limit your dreams, your voice, or your strength. So just keep shining and YOLO.
Love it. I say be loud and be proud. Like I tell my daughter, don't try fit into a small green circle if you are a brightly big and beautifully colored square. My name's Natasha, and I'm living with a disability.
Just once again, a warm appreciation and thank you to our two NACOSA employees, Natasha and Inati, for showcasing their experiences with hidden and visible disabilities to raise awareness. We also have put in the chat a explanation of the differences between visible and hidden disabilities that you're welcome to look at. But I also just wanted to say that we've been very deliberate in not indicating people living with disabilities, but highlighting people with disabilities, because it's been advocated that they're not just living, but they're striving with their disabilities. So once again, thank you, Inati and Natasha, for showcasing and teaching us what is expected in terms of inclusivity. I also just want to thank you again to New Productions for their corporate social investment in producing this video to highlight the realities. We now move on to our next speaker. Please be aware that there is French interpretation as well as sign language interpretation. You are welcome to go to the interpretation icon and select the necessary one. Our next speaker is Commissioner Nomashlupi Kwinana from the South African Human Rights Commission. Commissioner is an admitted attorney with over 2 decades of experience and the founding director of Timkulo Kwinana Attorneys since 2001. She has served as an acting judge of the Gauteng High Court since 2020, contributing through her judgments. Beyond the courtroom, she's a committed activist against gender-based violence and femicide, a feminist, and the national coordinator of the South African Women Lawyers Association student chapter, where she mentors aspiring women lawyers. Her leadership extends into community work and organizations as SWATLA, the National Democratic Lawyers Association, and the Lady of Peace Community Foundation. Currently, she serves as Commissioner of the South African Human Rights Commission, where she continues her lifelong dedication to justice, equality, and human rights. The Commissioner Kwinana will speak around responding to human rights violations experienced by people with disabilities. Commissioner, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, Program Director, for this opportunity. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me stand on the protocol that has already been established and really appreciate NACOSA for creating this platform. Really a very important, engagement to have, where it is important to realize how we are unconsciously biased when it comes to persons with disabilities, as already alluded to by the 2 ladies that spoke before me. Indeed, it is so. And this is something very close to my heart for a simple reason that of my focal areas, amongst others, it is persons with disabilities, it's older persons, it is as well children, social security, civil and political rights, as well as justice. So I am indeed a commissioner, the Human Rights Commission, a Human Rights Commission, which is a Chapter 9 institution. We can move to the next slide, and I apologize, I'm really going to forget. It is a Chapter 9 institution, with your public protector, with gender commission, equality, with the yeah, I'm sure you know all of them. If you can just look through there. And we are guided by the Constitution. So in terms of Section 181, we were established as a Human Rights Commission, and our powers are alluded to at 184 as to what is it that we can do of the Constitution. We are also then established in terms of our own act, which is the South African Human Rights Commission Act 40 of 2013, which is really about promoting human rights, the observance and the protection of human rights without fear, without favor. And I'm sure you all be aware that it's not selectively. It does not say only a certain nationality. Unfortunately, that is what our law says currently. Lest I be chastised, like we have been chastised in the public domain. But that is what the Constitution currently states. May we move to the next slide? So, all organs of state must support the Human Rights Commission, the assistance reasonably required for the effective exercise of its powers and performance of its function. And that is at Section 18, subsection 4. I've already mentioned the section that has established us. We can move to the next slide. Now, as Human Rights Commission, amongst our powers, which I've already alluded to at 184, we do have the power to litigate, to hold inquiries and hearings, stakeholder engagements, public outreach. We then monitor, and we also have dialogues. So, for instance, the dialogue that we have this afternoon. So as the South African Human Rights Commission, we then look at a number of rights, but I'm sure the rights that are important for this conversation, especially Section 9, which talks about that we are all equal before the law and we should not be discriminated against. So it doesn't matter whether you're a person with a disability or not, you should not be discriminated against. Also, we've got the PEPUDA, which promotes equality and prohibits discrimination, hate speech, and harassment. You're also aware of the white paper on rights of persons with disabilities, which was earmarked in 2016. And of course, the UN CRPD of 2016. Which was 2006, which was ratified in 2007. Let me just say to you, you know what has been my cry since last year when I started on this focal area was that when you look at the legal framework, it's only in certain areas of the acts, like the ones that I've mentioned here. But there isn't really a comprehensive legal framework that is specifically earmarked for persons with disabilities. And that is why last year in our portfolio committee engagement, those were our submissions to say it is time to have a legal framework that only speaks to all the issues of persons with disabilities. Let's move to the next slide. And with regard to the violations which have already been alluded to by Leandre there, and I'll try not to repeat so that I don't eat into my time a lot, but really, as already even asked by the other participant there to say, you know, I'm not aware. That's exactly what we have observed, that people are not aware of their rights, and of course, then there's also lack of really acceptance. And then there's negative attitudes, and there's prejudice, there's unconscious bias, as I said, and stigmatization. There's really discrimination, and of course, marginalizations. And when you go to structural barriers, you know, in certain areas, you find that there has been improvement, there are ramps, but then you still have areas where in a TVET college, they don't provide for persons with disabilities that are partially blind, who also wants to study at that particular TVET college. And that is a case that we are currently busy with, which is before the Equality Court. Whilst this would be Northwest, we have a TVET college that is doing very well in Free State. So what we have noted is that it looks like there's no you know, synergy with regard to how the different institutions are working with regard to these issues. Accommodation already stated, the workspace, the workplaces, and of course other spaces. And what I also saw was that some were complaining about the resources that are provided at the workplace. You are rendered redundant because you're not able to do your work. And whilst as at the time when they employed you, they were aware that certain resources would be required, those would not be provided. And that is why recently we had an opportunity to look at a policy with one of our stakeholders where we're just trying to assist them in how to craft it in such a way that it speaks to all those issues. Support is one of the big ones, because the other day I had to monitor a hospital in Limpopo where persons with disabilities are kept. You know, we were told, and very disheartening, that some of them have not seen their families for as long as they've been at that institution. So basically what happens is the families themselves, you know, they you know, it's like they distance themselves from their own family members because of the disability, which then says to us, then we need to talk more about it, but educate each other about it so that we can move away from the stigmatization. We can move to the next slide. So our current social human rights approach, so we have been, you know, looking at obviously service delivery, DSD, one of our stakeholders, forever engaging them because we want to know what is it that they are doing. And last year, when we monitored them, it was with regard to the different institutions that they would have earmarked where people with disabilities are placed, whilst they themselves do not ensure that there's compliance insofar as the structures that are put in place to assist the persons with disabilities. This is where we then come up with the reports, and of course, time frames for them to comply that are set by themselves. And of course, if they don't comply, this is where we then take them to court. And unfortunately, you know, with court, it takes forever. Yes, you ultimately get a court order then, but you know that there are other avenues. So people keep taking the matters from one level to another. At the moment, we are fighting just for our powers to be realized at the Constitutional Court, because once we would have made a recommendation, it is not taken as binding like the public protector, as you will know. As Human Rights Commission, we came up with a monitoring tool that have been working on improving since its inception. We thought that it was time to revamp it because for me, I felt that it was not paying attention to all sorts of disabilities. As has been correctly pointed out, there are just so many. there's visible ones and of course there are invisible ones. And all of them must be taken into account. We can move to the next slide. I think this has already been spoken to by my colleague, and let me not go so much into that. And then go back to our role as Human Rights Commission. As I said, we do investigate. So you do bring a case to us, or there are cases that I see myself, then I would record them as commissioner instituted complaints, which will then take forward. So there has been cases wherein we have had to do that. For instance, the one case was about a person who says that whilst I'm a person living with a disability, the issue is this. For me, 35 years is a cutoff age for me to be able to, it's a cutoff age for me as a person, but it should not apply to me as a person with disability, because I would have had challenges throughout my life, trying to navigate this life. And only at the time when I think I'm picking up, I'm told this is the end of my road. So this is the one case that we are still busy with. We are hoping the policy can be changed in order to be accommodative of persons with disabilities. Education is something that we are supposed to be doing. We try through our provinces, but very limited insofar as the manpower. And that is why what we have done is in the children's unit, we've got child rights ambassadors who are helping us to advocate. We also have civil societies that we work with, but other stakeholders as well. Like for instance, NACOSA, by giving us this platform, we are all trying to do the same thing, which is basically education and education and education. So yes, we can go to the next slide. So as a Human Rights Commission, we do have recommendations. For me, the first one should have been the comprehensive legal framework on persons with disabilities. But of course, then to strengthen the implementation and enforcement of all the laws that are out there. But most importantly, if we could have just one that encompasses everything. Enhance private sector accountability and employment and inclusion. Expand access to infrastructure and services. Currently, I don't know if my co-presenter there is aware, but Daily Ride has stopped certain persons with disabilities from accessing just that service, and that has become a serious challenge. PRASA, we are currently taking them to court because, again, they are not paying attention to persons with disabilities. We recently had a national scholar transport inquiry where, amongst others, the parents that came to testify were informing us that you'd find that a child who's using a wheelchair will have to be carried by other children. And that is where we said, but this is wrong in all terms. The transport that is provided should be paying attention to the need. And what we also realized was that this would be a mainstream school, which you found that they would be saying, no, rather take your child to another school. But whereas the only challenge they have is only the fact that they're on a wheelchair. And we are saying that they should be accommodated. If we are going to talk about inclusivity, that is where the departments need to be looking into that. And of course, the famous slogan, nothing about us without us. We are saying that persons with disabilities are supposed to be at the forefront insofar as their issues, because they are the better people to articulate what are their challenges. It does not really help to sit in a meeting and you sit with people that are body able, because they would not be able to assist us to think ahead. And that is why, as a commissioner of persons with disabilities, I have taken it upon myself to ensure that we've got a Section 11 committee where almost all the disabilities are being looked at. But over and above that, we then look at experts like your academia, as well as maybe legal professionals who will then assist in how we ensure that when we submit for issues of policies, for issues of the legal framework, we are able to be addressing the real issues that are on the ground. And is that my last slide? Is that the last one? And let me really thank you so much for this opportunity. Program
Thank
Director.
you. Thank you so much, Commissioner Kwinana. I just have, you have raised so many valuable points that I want to get into, but let me look first to see in the chat if there are any particular questions. I'm noticing a fantastic comment from Jennifer. I know we really need the legal frameworks and compliance, but I think we also need to figure out how we can help companies have a culture of inclusion. As culture chews up strategy, I love to see us change the culture of how people see us. We are people with disabilities who have unique gifts and talents to contribute to our society. Some really, really amazing point there, and well respected. I think that it's a really good point, Commissioner, around education that you mentioned earlier and sensitization in order to change culture. But I also think, Commissioner, with your permission, I think that one of the things that you are very pivotal in is research. And we are concerned, are there any data gaps or research gaps in terms of people with disabilities, but particularly key populations with disabilities experiencing human rights violations? And why is that, if it is the case? Over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you so much. I think that is definitely informed by the fact that there isn't collaboration enough with the different stakeholders, whether it's civil society, the Department of Social Development, anyone who is in that space. If there was really communication enough, then we'd be able to write reports that will be able to look at all the different, aspects of disability. But what we have done from ourselves was that we did our own monitoring, and we're still working on the report. And the reports take a while, especially in instances where you want them to really address all those instances. And that is what when I came on last year, I said, for me, the gap really in this, it was the ones that were mentioned, even on our own catalog that we have at the Human Rights Commission. It was a few. And I said, no, this is definitely not conclusive, and we need to work on it so that we can make sure that it addresses other disabilities that were not mentioned. And that is why I then decided on the Section 11 committee, which tries and encompasses these other disabilities, whether it's your autism, some people just have a mental challenge, but not that, it's severe. It's just that, there are times when it's stressful. I learned about being colorblind. I learned so much that I realized that unfortunately that data is just not available.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Commissioner, I think we're going to conclude your session, but I just wanted to say to you, I really do appreciate, or NACOSA appreciates you highlighting that, hidden disabilities, there is too much of a gap in terms of recognizing and addressing programs for hidden disabilities, never mind visible disabilities in itself. So I think that, from us as civil society, it needs to become our mission to advocate for program and legal frameworks that recognize both visible and hidden disabilities. And we welcome you to share that report once it's concluded, and we will ensure that it's disseminated across our attendees and across our networks. So thank you again, Commissioner. We greatly appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
If I may, Leandra, introduce you. Fantastic. So Leandra Rose began her career in social work in 1995, entering the disability field in 1998, where she worked with the Cape Town Association for the Physically Disabled. From 2001 to 2014, she held various roles at the Department of Social Development and the City of Cape Town, eventually leading the Youth Development Program. She currently heads the Services to Persons with Disabilities program, managing funding for NPOs, and is also involved in voluntary pastor and Bible college teaching. Leandra Rose from the Department of Social Development will talk to the programmatic and policy gaps in servicing people with disabilities. Leandra, you're more than welcome. We will share your slides. So thank you.
Thank you so much. You can all hear me?
You are well and audible. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. As you've heard, my name is Leandra Sylvester Rose, and I work as a social work policy manager within the Services to Persons with Disabilities program. Now, I would just like, as a short introduction, just say I might not have the experience of being called someone with a disability, but I sure have the experience, and this is with my son being diagnosed while he was at school with a visual impairment. And I remember the first thing that I heard when I was called in by his principal was put him in a special school. Nothing about, there is something that we can do about this. And the interesting part was that the person who picked up that he was struggling to see was actually a teacher with a disability. And that actually said a lot about what was happening within the school setup. Long story short, I had to go in and say, meet me halfway. And please, I will meet you halfway. In the end, he went through his school career with them making special concessions for him in terms of writing exams. And this just really taught me that if there's a will, if there's really a will, we can make life easier for persons with disability. Next slide, please. So that is just my name, so we can move to the next one. The Services to Persons with Disability program, one of 7 programs within the Department of Social Development. And it is really the mission of the Western Cape DSD to ensure a comprehensive network of services to persons with disabilities. And it is about enabling and empowering those that are vulnerable and those with special needs. And throughout my presentation, I really wanted to be very practical and show particular examples as to how we would take hands with other departments to adopt an integrated approach in terms of service delivery. We can move to the next slide. This is just my presentation format, and I actually took it just as Yolande gave it to me because I wanted to be sure that I stick to what is important for this particular webinar. So I'll stick to my time allocation, but I will speak to our role versus other departments, the collective responses in terms of integrated service delivery, working in silos, which are still very evident. I'll speak to barriers and gaps, and then also opportunities for improvement, a call to action, accessibility of services, and that is rural versus urban, because that is also how our program is divided. I'm going to talk a little bit about human rights violations, and then funding gaps. We can move to the next slide. So the first one, the main focus of our program is basically around funding to NPOs. And if I have highlighted here in the slide the areas that we are looking at, which is residential facilities, it's psychosocial services in social life skills centers, or that used to be known as protective workshops. Then we've got daycare centers for adults and children with disabilities and social services organizations. So I've also indicated that the program does identify or we try as far as possible to respond to gaps in service delivery and to design programs to address these particular needs, but I'll speak to that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So you'll find here that I'm speaking on collective responses, and I've basically just given you the examples, but I will speak to it. This was one of the areas, the right to education court order, and it was actually the sector taking the whole of government to court, and this was concerning services to children with severe to profound physical disabilities. Actually, not just physical, but across the board. So, of course, it's a court order. So, government was then instructed to come up with a response to services for children living with severe to profound disabilities. And now I'm saying living. So DOE, which is Department of Education, DST, DOH, and then also Department of Mobility, came together with the Western Cape Forum for Intellectual Disabilities and formulated the Right to Education Forum or task team, and basically came up with responses per the different departments to provide the much needed assistance for children with severe to profound disabilities within those centers. And you will find there under point B that I'm speaking to DSD's response to this particular service, which was the provision of transport. And I want to highlight that because it is not necessarily within our mandate to provide transport, but because we saw the need and because we knew that funding was a problem, we then had an MOU with Department of Mobility saying we'll provide the money, we'll provide the specifications, we'll provide the know-how in terms of disability if you will meet us halfway and actually procure those vehicles for us according to your contracts, but also adapting those vehicles. That would make it life a little bit easier within those centers, because we would find that children would travel with taxis to get to a center, which is not conducive in terms of transport for those children. But to date, we have handed over 14 vehicles, and this is across the province to centers, so that they can have the appropriate transport for those children to and from the center. So I just wanted to highlight that one. And then the respite care service is also one of the areas that we are involved in. And this is National Department of Social Development coming together with JICA. And JICA is basically, it's an international, Japan, it's called, let me just get my words together. It is, where did I write that one down? It's the Japanese International Cooperation Agency, and they came together with National Department of Social Development to have a response to the fact that we are having an increased problem with getting placement for persons with disability within residential facilities. So this program, you can also see the host of stakeholders that I listed there that's currently coming together to make these services accessible within the community, but as well as facility-based services. Can we have the next slide, please? So working in silos, and you'll see there I'm putting in capital letters no. The provinces are not all aligned. Um, there's still a lack of proper coordination of services. And initially, you know, the rest of the partners look at DSD to do this. But we are just like all the other departments, a service delivery vehicle. So, and we've been advocating for this kind of coordination on a higher level from the Department of the Premier, bringing all the different partners together in order for us to ensure that we have got an holistic approach to services to persons with disability. But on the other hand, while it's not happening, we decided to implement a provincial disability forum where we're bringing the partners together to ensure that they are informed of what happens within the sector, but also to get their inputs in terms of making service delivery more effective. Next slide, please. The barriers and the gaps, opportunities for improvement, it's the lack of sensitization. It's the stigma that still exists. It's the fear for what we don't understand. It's the lack of awareness. And then the previous speaker just spoke about the snippets in terms of legislation earlier. And we've highlighted here, it's the limited publication of legislation protecting persons with disability. It's awareness and training, it's capacity building, and then disability implementation should run through all spheres of government and the whole of society. I was thinking earlier, if I was the one that had to make decisions around what happens within government and within the different services, I would not have a disability unit. I would go to a program like youth development and ask them, what is your response to disability? I would go to children and families and ask them, what is your response to disability? Because it is a transversal issue. And once we are not looking at like that in that regard, we're still going to struggle with having snippets here and snippets there. We're also then saying we should have one document that contains all the acts and sections that mandates services to persons with disability. Next slide, please. The call to action. So the National Department of Social Development developed a policy on the provision of social development services to persons with disability, and thus far extensive public participation processes where relevant role players were consulted happened, and this will now be tabled before Cabinet in September 2025. So yes, it still looks like there's not much happening within the sector, but slowly but surely we are making inroads, because the expected outcome is the formulation of a bill, and we're hoping to go towards the formulation of an act. So this policy speaks to holistic service delivery or integration, and then also the oversight services for implementation of services to disability is imperative. Next slide, please. Accessibility of services, rural versus urban. So the concerns is mainly around the unequal spread of services. And we find that within even our own program, there's more within the metro than in the rural areas. We're speaking to non-availability of skills in rural areas to design programs to increase access to effective programs. And then there's the vast distances between towns that makes service delivery also, it hampers it and it makes it challenging, and funding, of course. Next slide, please. Human rights violations people with disability face. So I've highlighted access to services, and I'm alluding again to the rural areas and the traveling to get to those areas. One thing I wanted to highlight also is while I was working in the older person sector, we would negotiate home visits for the elderly, but also for persons with disability who needed to apply for a grant, for instance, because that was an area that lacked. And it's really something that needs to be looked at. Access to buildings and transport, discrimination, the employment of persons with disability is still strictly a compliance issue. It's literally a tick box. So we try as far as possible from our side, from the department, to push this and to make sure that there is a level of representation of persons with disability within our department. Neglect, I've highlighted shelter and family responsibility. A huge area, the family responsibility. Nowadays, it's so easy for somebody just to say, this is the state's responsibility. I cannot look after my loved one anymore. Then the lack of reasonable accommodation. This is also something that we've been seriously monitoring and implemented. One example that I can mention is somebody on my floor that cannot sit for long periods of time, and she was then given an elevated desk to ensure that she can stand to make it easier on her back. Next slide, please. Funding gaps, there will always be a funding gap. Our response to funding is mainly operational cost. What is important to note is that Treasury regulations only allow for us to subsidize a portion of any NPO's implementation plan. Poor costing models resulting in allocation of small budgets. Next slide, please. And my time is up, so I'm saying thank you very much. I will now allow for questions.
Thank you so much, Leandra. We greatly appreciate you providing perspective from the Department of Social Development. We just pause now to see if there's any questions in the chat. So please, if you just allow me to give a second. So I don't note any questions and I don't note any hands, but perhaps, Leandra, if you don't mind, I could ask some questions. So Leandra, I think that the one thing I just wanted to pick up on and get your perspective about is that we are key population program grant management as well as implementation organization. And there's obviously a concern that, that perhaps the programs and the policies don't necessarily refer to key populations with disabilities, your sex workers, people who use drugs, MSM, even prisoners in correctional service facilities. So I think my question is, where do you perhaps see a gap, and where do you see a gap in terms of how we're addressing programs and policies for key populations with disabilities?
Look, I would if I could, and that is why I said we've got a particular focus. But I think maybe it's also the case that you're referring to key populations that people still not have the confidence to come forward, because we do have our regional offices that's dealing with casework. So what I can say, it's not that the services is not available. It is whether the people actually have the confidence to go and to knock and to say, this is what I require. So I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think that you may have a point in terms of maybe also about information sharing, education. People with disabilities. In your opinion, how visible is access to services from Department of Social Development or the Department of Education or Department of Health? In your opinion, how accessible, how visible is it for them to know where to access?
Yeah, I think it is quite visible, and especially lately, there's quite a lot of awareness campaigns. Sometimes our program gets invited to get involved. We've got what we call Disability Rights and Awareness Month, where we just go out and advocate and just communicate, making people aware, having different themes. We've got about 16 service delivery areas, and in all of those areas, there is a dedicated focus, because we've got what they call a PIC unit, which is program implementation and coordination. And part of what they are delivering on is disability specific.
We do have a hand up from Maliba. So Maliba, let's just see if we can unmute you, and then you're welcome to ask your question.
Hi, mine is not going to be a question per se. I'm just going to be adding my 2 cents here and there. So I'm Tulufelo Maliba. I'm a third level student at the University of Limpopo. I am the chairperson of Saula SC in the University of Limpopo, and I'm also a student living with disability. I am partially sighted, right? So I would like to disagree with you on the point where you mentioned that the information is made readily available to people. And I'm speaking from my perspective, what I've seen and what I've observed through the years, right? So you mentioned about all these programs that you guys have been doing, but on our side, we have never seen such. This is my first time ever getting an invitation or knowing about a program that is speaking about people with disabilities. And I'm 22, you know? And also, there's been, I don't know if I can say a trend, but there's this thing where when you apply for stuff, they ask you if you have a disability. You do state it, you explain everything that you need, but you are still not catered for. And then they come back and they say, no, but why didn't you come to us? Why didn't you do this and this and this and this and this and this and that? And then our question is, when you received our applications, it was written there the disability we have and the type of assistance we need. Yet you still want us to come to you and still tell you that, hi, I'm living with a disability and this is what I need. What about the stigmatization towards us? We don't want to be treated as a person with a disability. We just want to be treated as people. So for me to come to you and say, hi, this is me. Now, the way you now treat me and the way you think I comprehend stuff becomes more reduced, you know? Your level of trust in me in handling certain, ngathini na, like, programs or duties becomes very little because to you, I'm living with a disability and people with disabilities can't do much stuff, you know? So
Mm.
as much we would like to come forward, it also does bring negative implications for us and it gets tiring. Yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Your two
Okay.
cents were incredibly valuable. Leandra, I
Yeah.
know that you're speaking on behalf of the Western Cape, but the reality
Yes.
is that her experiences is a shared across nations. Your take on this?
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I do agree with her. I was thinking earlier that we attend provincial meetings in other provinces. And the last time that we gave a report back, it was like, wow, look at the things that you are doing. And you could pick up that the kind of services is not the same if you go from province to province, and it will never be the same because it also depends on what is available. But I tend to agree with her wholeheartedly in terms of, especially within the space of having to apply for a job and never hearing anything back again. Um, I, I, I can't give you an answer. I don't know if it's the human element, what it is, and that is why I highlighted in my presentation that it becomes a tick box. Because even this is my honest opinion, when people do look at persons with disability, is it really because I want to do this, or is it because I need to comply with the laws of the country? We've got somebody on our floor who is in a wheelchair. And most of what is happening within the space, because we are on the fourth floor, is accessible so that she can get access to the building, also in case of an emergency. So from the Western Cape's point of view, is that we're really pushing. And I can also say a lot has to do with the political will, because currently, with the new minister in office, disability specifically gets so much attention, and he actually goes out and advocate for public-private partnerships. Just even to make the sector a little bit more empowered in having more funding, having more to make services available to persons with disability. So that's my response.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your transparency and your willingness to hear the frustration from others.
Oh,
And we thank you again for presenting. So we'll move on now to our last speaker. And we have Ms. Tobeka Batetwa, who is a prominent disability rights advocate in South Africa, holding key leadership roles in the National Civil Society Forum and as the national resource mobilizer for the SANAC Civil Society Forum. She actively ensures the voice of persons with disabilities is included in decision making and has the ear of global funding agencies to voice the sector needs. Her dedication is further demonstrated through her roles as trustee for the South African Disability Development Trust and alumna of the USAID-funded Young Africans Leaders Initiative. Thank you so much, Tobeka, who will be talking around resource mobilization for programming for people with disabilities, but also highlighting the need for inclusivity of people with disabilities. Tobeka, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Tobeka, you are audible,
Okay.
and your video we're just waiting for, but you are audible.
It's not on. I think I've, okay, let me try.
Your video seems to be on, but...
sorry.
Fantastic. So thank you so much,
Okay.
Tobeka, for also sharing your lived experience as someone with a disability. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I wish to rise on the protocol that is already observed and wish to thank NACOSA and the organizers for including me on this very important webinar. Just before I get to my slide, maybe we can start showing the slide. I do want to start by saying the following. Having listened to the two previous speakers, there's one common goal where there is the lack of collaboration and inclusion. And I think my presentation, I chose not to be too technical because one, I'm an activist, I'm a person with a disability, and what can I say? I'm a person with a disability and or a disability rights activist. So I am in the forefront, not by myself, with many others from across the country who we've put ourselves on the firing line, because I think you would take just from what Solofelo said, her contribution where information is not readily available to us. And I myself, being at the forefront, being at a national level on different platforms and arenas, I haven't heard of half the information that has been shared by the speakers, which shows that there is systematic exclusion of persons with disabilities. And at the tail end of the previous speaker's presentation, she mentioned the phrase, "nothing about us without us." And this is a phrase that was coined by the disability sector years ago, but it is a phrase that is now used by everyone, whether it's youth and so forth, and it has worked for many, but still struggles to yield much for the people that created the phrase of nothing without us, nothing about us without us. So taking from there, I'll start my presentation. I think you're off the cover page. You can go to the first page, which is my introduction. I think coming back from the tail end of what I just shared, also, we know that it's been 31 years since the dawn of democracy and, you know, the rule of the majority. But we find that people with disabilities, yes, there's been developments in the country for citizens of South Africa, and the government has created multiple initiatives. But still, you find that in that progress, exclusion is still compounded for persons with disabilities. And it is the quest for progress, the quest for improvement, and the quest for success that is inherent to all South Africans and the government, that you'll find that in that quest, there is a group of people, which are persons with disabilities, that are often left behind and not seen. So this is the current status quo that people with disabilities live under. So we can go to the next slide. And I'd like you to allow me for this one, because it's just a question. It's a question to say, I just want just two contributors to explain to me, because this is a slide on fundamental exclusion, to explain to me what is the difference between inclusion and involvement. So if anyone just wants to take a a try at that. I'll give maybe 2 people. Just the difference between inclusion and involvement. I'd like maybe some of the people with disabilities that are on the platform, or anyone, particularly maybe the commissioner, my other speaker as well from DSD, if you can just take a jab at that. I'll wait.
I see that we have Maliba. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, from my understanding, I would say that inclusion is us being considered when decisions are taken, but involvement is us being part of the process when those decisions are taken. It's us also having a say and us also raising maybe questions or other things that we may have towards whatever it is that they are doing at that specific time that involves us as people living with disabilities.
Okay, anyone else?
I think that's it, Tobeka. So
Okay,
over to you.
All right, can you move on to the next slide, which speaks to inclusion? Okay, so she was right. Tulufele, you were right with regards to what inclusion is. Inclusion creates a safe environment. So when someone is included, it means they are valued for their uniqueness and as part of a collective. So in a space that is inclusive, it gives every participant or every person the ability and the freedom to express themselves and ensure that every opinion is viewed as valuable. So the views of everyone are carefully considered and viewed as valuable. We can go to the next slide, which speaks to involvement. And we moved, okay. Now the difference with involvement is that when it comes to involvement, there is some limitation, because involvement, when you say the word involvement, it speaks to a large group of people coming together, but you'll find that it's the loudest voice that gets seen most of the time. So instead of the different voices and opinions being valued, in terms of involvement, now we stand the risk of, because there's supposed to be involvement, because there's supposed to be multiple voices, you'll find that now people are included or are involved in decision-making processes or in maybe tasks and so forth, for the mere fact of them being involved, so that there can be a tick box exercise that they were involved. But in and of itself, involvement can come at any stage. Let's say if there's a project and people with disabilities maybe are involved at stage 4 or 5, a person can still justify and say people with disabilities were involved. But now, from the creation of the project, from the beginning, people are not involved. So they are put there at the tail end for the sake of maybe ticking a box to say, yeah, there were 3 or 4 people with disabilities. So essentially, your opinion is stifled and you can't readily or easily make an impact on whatever task you're involved in. So that is the difference. We can move on to the next slide. So in addressing any type of gap, be it in programming, be it in terms of resource allocation, and in resource allocation, whether it's private, government, and so forth. Now, we need to first acknowledge that we've misinterpreted for the longest time, because I think also among the 2 presenters, what I did pick up is that there is a level of misinterpretation of inclusion, of involvement, and it's being seen as inclusion. Because with inclusion, people are included from the onset, from inception, before a project is even designed. People with disabilities, it is designed with them in mind, with them being part and parcel of every stage. So I think the systematic problem that we have as a society, not just South Africa, globally, the challenge is that we have people who are not with disabilities. And this is not to say that we can do things alone. No, we live in a multicultural country with multiple voices, and we don't live in an island as people with disabilities. However, we have people who are not with disabilities making decisions on our behalf. Shortage of people with disabilities who have qualifications, who have studied, gone to school, and also have the benefits. I'm going to use the word benefits on purpose. The benefits of having disability, which then means insight into disabilities. So that is the main challenge, where we have programs that are prescribed for us rather than us. Sorry, I'm being interrupted. Apologies for that. Oh, sorry. Yes, let me just, sorry. Apologies for that. Am I back on? Sorry, I had a disruption. Hello? Still on.
Rebecca, you are audio and visual.
Sorry for that disruption.
Not a problem.
Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, if we want to address the challenges that we currently have, we must see people with disabilities not as beneficiaries, but as co-decision makers. So as I sit here today, I'm not alone. There are multiple leaders in my province, other provinces, people with disabilities like myself. I don't exist as an island, that are there. We've put ourselves on the line and work, because what we see also is that ourselves, and we see our own capabilities. So that's why we don't allow ourselves to sit and complain. Because also when we complain to the likes of DSD, when we complain to the likes of DSD and other government departments, they will prescribe things for us. Whereas if we see them and join forums where we're able to partner with them, that's where we'll reach the success that we need. Can we move on to the next slide? I think this is a slide. Please guide me. This is the slide on the next steps.
Correct.
Or is it the slide on the, yes.
It's the next steps,
okay.
intentional
So
inclusion.
Now with the, yes, thank you. So now the next steps, because I speak here not only just as an activist, but then also as a person who sits on these decision-making platforms, who's forced their way to make sure that I sit at tables with government and I sit at tables with the private sector to make decisions, to make solutions or create solutions that are tailor-made for people with disabilities, not necessarily recreating the wheel, but taking existing projects and making them accessible for persons with disabilities. So these are the three core principles that should involve or anchor any program implementation, program creation, any funding process, whether it's request for proposals or anything. These are the three principles that should anchor everything. I don't want to complicate everything, but when you look at these three principles, the first one, you see the points that are there: intentional inclusion. When you're intentional with what you need to achieve, you do, like if you sit at a decision-making table, you do receive these complaints and requests from persons with disabilities. Who would best know about disability? It is the very people with disabilities. So when you make sure that people with disabilities are included at every point, whether there's a request, because we can all, whether there's a youth sector, there's PHIV sector, there's women's sector, we all request for, we all have requests for funding, we all have the similar needs. But there are those intricate additions that ought to be reserved for persons with disabilities. So there is that extra budget or extra consideration for the physical maybe limitations that persons with disabilities may have. So when you involve them from the beginning, you will not find yourself, you will not find instances of mismanagement of funds or wasteful expenditure, because with a product that is produced will be inclusive from beginning to end. So I think you can also see the other points that I've listed there. And then another thing, the next point is accessibility. Now, accessibility is not just having a laptop, it's not just maybe having a sign language interpreter, it's not limited to just that. It's also includes whether it's medium, because there is information, like Tolofelo said, we don't receive all this information, this is new to us. There are mediums that are accessible to people with disabilities. I know that if I want to communicate with a blind person, I'll go to the radios, I'll put audio description on with the campaign material, if it's on social media or wherever, even if it's on television. If it is audio described, a blind person can access that. a deaf person, if there's a sign language interpreter and there are subtitles, that deaf person can access that information that everyone else is accessing and in real time. So you're not left behind as an afterthought. And also, when you, in terms of accessibility also speaks to the manner in which information is disseminated. One, we know that sometimes we get lost in the language. We get lost in the jargon. So to make sure that all our messaging is done in palatable language, that we can understand, whether you translate it to various languages, that's one. And then also that we make sure that a person at any category of disability is reached. So you work again with the sector. So the main problem that the main thing that we should consider in inclusion is collaboration with the sector, because they know what they need and they will guide you. And then the last one, I actually put the shortest contribution for this one, sustainability. So in terms of sustainability, we do programs that will have a long-lasting impact. By long-lasting impact, it's not just simply saying, okay, because we've done this, we can grow on this project and do this and do that. No. But we must make sure that we don't create a dependable disability, like a dependency syndrome for persons with disabilities. No, but when we do something that is sustainable, it means that the person with disability can take this very information, use it for themselves to improve themselves. Because our aim is to make sure that all people with disabilities are economic citizens in the country, not that they are always waiting to receive the social grants, which we all know is not enough. But if we make sure that we put disability at the forefront, as you said, as the attorney said, the commissioner said, if nothing about us without us is put at the forefront, then we know that people with disabilities, let them lead the charge because they are able and ready to. I think that's where I'll cap my presentation. And Yarlin, I think there's someone on the comments who had written about them being visually impaired. Maybe if you can give me that person's contact details, because they were speaking about assistive devices. Thank you.
Not a problem. I will share those details with you soon. Just once again, thank you so much to Becca for, someone was saying to me, you are dropping fireballs. And that's exactly what we need. We do need people, advocates speaking freely. Please keep your video on. We will start with the question and answers. We'll want to note if there's any hands in the chat or any comments in the chat. I'm not seeing any. Maliba, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I also want to speak on my experiences on some of the things that she spoke about, right? So I did mention that I'm in the University of Limpopo and I'm a third-year student. So we know that all these institutions have something called SRC elections, right? And the disability desk chairperson is one of the portfolios that they have. So throughout the years, we saw how messy the political arena was getting, because in our institution, the SRC, you vote for political parties. So the Economic Freedom Fighters Youth Command, SASCO, MKPSM, and stuff like that, right? And we saw that here, it's getting too messy. We've been going to student governance to try and advocate for autonomy in terms of the disability desk chairperson, meaning that us as students from RDC, which is the Riagona Disability Center, can we please be allowed to vote for the chairperson that we want to lead us, right? And we were told that no, it can't happen. If that is what we want to do, it would mean that the, what is this thing called? The finances, because there's an SRC budget, it would mean that the money towards the DDC would only come from our SRC levy as students living with disabilities. And we're in minority, meaning that it wouldn't even be enough to run one program, right? So eventually it happened that for the first time, these political parties did not have a student from RDC as the disability desk chairperson. So they went and they chose their friends. Mind you, these are the same political parties and student activists that never come to us. They never include us when they are hosting programs. We are literally an afterthought where they only remember that, oh, Ghana, there's students living with disabilities when we have to vote. But other than that, they don't care. They then went and they decided to choose their own friends. And ever since then, it has been a trend. This year is the second year. Nobody from RDC has been made the disability desk chairperson candidate. And what is sad is the fact that we are there. We are student activists. We are affiliated with these programs. But because we are not their friends and they don't care about us, all they want are the benefits that come with being in the SRC, they take us and they cast us to the side, all in the name of the policy does not state that the DDC must be from RDC, right? Which goes back to the legal framework that we need. People are now going to the extent of using the non-existent framework that caters for students living with disabilities against us. So how are we going to continue fighting a losing battle? It is so sad to see how demoralized and don't care students are now. We are even having casual day on the 5th of September. Students living with disabilities, they don't even want to participate because they know that year in, year out, we host programs, year in, year out, they don't come. And then on the day of SSC elections, all of a sudden, you now know which races that we stay at. There's literally so much that is happening. And yeah, wow, I don't have words.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I don't think it's at all uncommon. I can see Tobeka's face as she acknowledges your experience. So, Tobeka, you're welcome to unmute to respond.
Sir, you are muted.
Okay, no, thank you. I just want to address you directly to the fellow. Number one, I think as persons with disabilities, we also need to be our own champions, because no one is going to champion things for us because they don't understand our lived experience. The one thing that I want to speak to you about is I want you to also divorce the notion or the belief that you're a person living with a disability. You're not. And I don't want you addressing yourself as that. You are a person with a disability, and you don't live with the disability, you live with everyone that is around you. So you also deserve the space. And don't limit yourselves as persons with disabilities to just maybe vying for the positions that are ring fence for persons with disabilities. Who says you can't run for presidency of the SRC? Who says you can't run for SG of the SRC? You are very much capable. And I think also we must empower ourselves as well as persons with disabilities, because we've seen that when we rely on the systems that we are under, or maybe the institutions that we are in, to be our own advocates, we are not going to reach anything. So the very same opportunities that are availed to able-bodied youth, in your case, in your university space, is the same space that must be ring-fenced for you. There's nowhere in the SRC handbook where it says, if you have a disability, you can't stand for presidency. No, you can't. But in terms of disability, because there are those disability-specific knowledge that you must have, that very disability desk, that one ought to be led by a person with a disability, and you need to advocate, because you can't have a Tom, Dick, and Harry walking on the street coming to speak to you about disability, because that is the very problem that we have in the country as we speak. So one, know that you don't live with a disability, you live with everyone, the community around you. And two, don't limit yourselves as people with disabilities. Don't be.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Tobeka. I think, Tobeka, you are also kind of answering Manako's question around concrete action steps to address fundamental exclusion. And just noting some of the points you made around, standardization is critical. We need to be looking at making sure that we are inclusive, not necessarily just involving people in the last minute, which I think also previous guests have mentioned as well as a concern. So thank you so much, Tobeka, for yours. I also just want to make it very clear that we will ensure that the recording of this is available to all attendees and also all the presentations. So thank you again for making yourself available to speak to us. We are moving on to concluding our webinar, and Tobeka just made it very clear to me we need much more time on this. So we will be reaching out to you again, Tobeka, to speak specifically to the fundamental exclusion mitigation measures that we can be doing. So if we can move to the next part, which is just highlighting our next and last webinar episode, which is related to our expansion of harm reduction services, specifically looking at the opiate substitution therapy program that has been managed by NACOSA with its district implementers at 8 people who use drugs sites. We will be highlighting what has been come from this evaluation, but also at this webinar on the 17th of September, 2025 at 12 o'clock, we will also have speakers from the Harm Reduction International, as well as from the people who use drugs subsector under the SANAC Civil Society Forum. So please register to attend this webinar. It will also give opportunities for civil society to raise your voices for the expansion of harm reduction services, not only for people who use drugs, but the intersectional key populations that are affected or using substances. From NACOSA, once again, we would like to express a gratitude to Tobeka, Commissioner Kiwana from South African Human Rights Commission, Tobeka from the Resource Mobilization within SANAC Civil Society, also Leandra Rose from the Department of Social Development for being our speakers at this webinar. We would also like to thank our translators from Happy Clouds for the French and sign language interpretation. A technical team from SACATIV, as always, leading us in the right direction to ensure our webinars are successful. And then also a warm appreciation for, once again, the video production by New Productions, a subsidiary of the Avenue House Pty Limited. And last but not least, and a great appreciation and thank you for the support provided by VIV Healthcare Positive Action Program grant to make these series of webinars possible. Thank you all for your participation and attendance, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.
People, thank you again.
Many thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Leandra. Thank you,
Bye.
Tobeka.